Hello everyone, Clark Meyer with the Rise to Wealth here, and wanted to make another video on rental properties. And specifically in this video, we're making a video about the best, in my opinion, rental property calculator that exists online today, just based on how straightforward it is and all the information that it provides you in terms of your cash on cash return, the amount of cash flow you get, and your return over time as well. Because if you have a leveraged property, you're going to see that your return actually gets better the longer you hold the asset. So I'm going to dive right in here with an example of a rental property that I have, which I purchased in 2017 for about $115,000 in Indianapolis. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I live in California, but I invest in Indianapolis. So I wanted to break this down for anybody who's interested in purchasing real estate out of state, or if you're looking at a property near where you live and you wanted to get an estimate on what your potential return could be based on several metrics that are really important. This is a great tool that I found online, one of my favorite, for you to get an understanding of that. So let's jump right into the rental property that I have. So I bought it in 2017 for $115,000. I did 20% down. I think my interest rate was 4.6%. I did a 30-year term. Closing costs will keep it $3,000. Now my rent is $1,100. I still have the same tenant from 2 years ago, which is great because that you don't want to pay a lot of money in turnover costs. So when somebody moves out, you might have to replace carpet or clean it up. So that's positive. But the other benefit about getting $1,100 in rent for a property that costs $115,000 is that you're getting close to what's called the 1% rule, meaning you want to get $1,000 in rent for a property that's going to cost you $100,000 if you're doing leverage at 20% down. So another example, if you get a property that's $200,000, you want to get $2,000 in rent. So that's the general rule of thumb to make sure you're going to cash flow on your investment property. Now over here, we'll talk about the income. There's no other income on this property, just the rent. But if you had a multifamily, you may have more income, like laundry, for example, is a good way to get extra income on your rental properties. But I don't have any, so we'll keep that blank. Now, vacancy rate is one of those cost that is not a true hard line cost like insurance or something. You know exactly what the payment's going to be every month, but you can guesstimate that based on the neighborhood as well as the type of property. And we'll keep this at 5%. Typically for multifamilies versus single families, the vacancy rate is going to be lower on single families because the typical tenant in a single family stays about 2 years, whereas the average stay for a multifamily tenant in an apartment building is about 6 to 8 months. So with single family, your vacancy rate is going to be much lower. So we'll keep that at 5. My property manager takes 9% of gross rent, so that's that number. Now, one thing to definitely keep in mind if you're going to buy in Indianapolis is that you're going to pay 2 times the property tax if you're an out-of-state investor. So for example, I live in California and I invest in Indianapolis, so I don't get a homestead exemption, so I'm going to pay 2 times the property tax. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Now, because of that, the property tax in Indianapolis is just under 1%. It's about 0.86. So I'm going to pay 2 times that. I think my property, it's just under $2,000. So we'll say it's $2,000 just to give an estimate. And I think my insurance is around $600. I think it's a little higher. I think it's like $680 per year. There's no HOA. Now, maintenance is another one, just like vacancy rate, where it's not a hard cost, but you want to get a guesstimate in there on what you should expect to pay. Because what we want to do here is get an example of your true return, not your raw cash flow or raw return. A lot of people will calculate their cash flow based on what's called a raw cash flow, meaning your principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And the difference between that and your income on the rent minus what your property manager is going to take, right? That would be considered your raw cash flow. But we want to do is consider everything. We want to consider vacancy rate. We want to consider maintenance, other costs. We want to consider everything so that we have an idea of what our real true return is at the end of the day. So we'll keep maintenance and other costs at $600 and $200. And we'll just keep these straight lined in terms of what the annual increase is going to be. Now, value appreciation we'll keep at 3%. The property that I bought there is probably worth about $160. As maybe some people might know, Indianapolis property prices have gone up quite a bit. But for the sake of this video, we'll keep it at 3%. If you're in a coastal market like New York or California, maybe you want to make this 4% because there's typically more appreciation in those markets. In terms of holding length, I'm a buy and hold investor, so I pretty much hold forever, but we'll keep this at 20 and we'll keep the cost to sell at 8%. So let's double check that we have everything correct here. And let's go ahead and calculate this. So as you can see, it's a pretty good return, 17.29%, and my cash flow is $189 per month. So what you want to achieve in terms of cash flow, as a rule of thumb, is you want to achieve $100 cash flow, true cash flow per door. So if you have a fourplex, you want to get about $400 true cash flow. And the reason for that is you want to make sure as you scale up that you're really generating something that is an asset for you and paying you every single month, instead of something that might look like it's generating you money, but it actually is not, because there's high vacancy, high maintenance, everything else that comes into play here. So it's really important to consider all the costs when you're putting your information in here. So the reason I really like this rental property calculator is because it breaks down, all the costs as well as the income here. So it gives you your cash flow. Definitely is the first thing I look at. And then I'll look at my internal rate of return and the cap rate. But I think my favorite part is really to scroll down and get a sense of what your cash on cash return is and break down over time. So the biggest thing that I like about real estate is your return and cash on cash return. As you're paying down that debt, your internal rate of return is going to get better, and your cash on cash return is going to get better. So you can see in year 15, it's a 24% cash on cash return, and it's a 17.9% internal rate of return. So those are good returns. And the other benefit that I like about real estate is that, let's say you sell this property, you can defer those capital gains through a 1031 exchange, as well as any positive rental cash flow you have usually gets wiped away by what's called depreciation. So I'll probably make a video on what that is exactly, but this is 17% return, and it's safe to say that you're not going to pay taxes on that, just because of depreciation is going to wipe away your cash flow. And if you have a lot of appreciation, you can defer that through a 1031 exchange. So as many people know, there's lots of benefits on the tax side from rental properties. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If anybody who's watching has some topics of interest that you'd like me to discuss or questions, I'm happy to answer any of those. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll be making more coming soon. Thanks.